Hello and welcome to the British Sitcom History Podcast. It's a film spin-off episode to tie in with our look at Porridge. We are looking at the film Porridge from 1979. My name is Alan. With me as always is Gareth.
Hello.
And joining us as always as well for our film episodes is our local film expert, Sol Harris.
Hello.
So, Sol, usually like to start. Well, obviously, Gareth and I have already talked about the show itself. So, the best place to start here is to ask you, what's your experience of Porridge, the TV series?
I believe I've watched all of it. Many moons ago, I got access to, I think, quite an outdated BBC archival system. I don't think.
Are you talking about iPlayer?
No, I don't think they use it anymore. I think they've probably got something new. But basically,
Sol did used to work for the BBC or something.
Yeah,
insider.
Yeah, and if you kind of blag it properly, like I did, you get access to this internal bit of software, basically, this website. And, I was meant to, I think it was very clear in all the terms and conditions that it was only for, BBC work. It wasn't for entertainment purposes. But as soon as I got access to this thing and set up with an account, I, of course, went through and dug up every episode of anything remotely interesting, every film I could find on it, because it wasn't just BBC shows, it was everything that went out on the BBC. But yeah, one of the things I found on there was every episode of Porridge, I believe. So I think I went through the series from start to finish back then.
How long ago was this, Sol? Because it is all on iPlayer.
Oh, right. This will be 2013, 14, something like that. Yeah. So I went through the whole show back then, and I remember it about as well as you can imagine someone who watched all of Porridge about 10 years ago would remember it. But Porridge is a revered classic, though, isn't it? It's a really well-regarded classic.
Yeah. It is in my house.
Yeah.
We
I get
regard
that.
it well.
I totally understand why it holds the place that it does, because it's arguably a bit of its time, I guess, but it holds up very well, I think. It's very enjoyable, good, well written, well performed.
That's definitely, that echoes our sentiments when we actually watched the whole thing and reviewed it recently. I think, though, just speaking of the film, I do think that what we get in the first sort of 15 minutes of the film is a lot of establishment of the setting, the world we're in, the characters, which I think is done really well, because if you're new to this, it's getting those characters in, it's introducing you to all this stuff. But if you've watched Porridge, it doesn't feel redundant. It doesn't feel like, oh, God, we've got to go through the thing. It just felt like good character stuff.
But that is interesting, because we've talked about these sitcom spin-off films before, and we've said in the past, there's no establishment. They are assuming everybody has been watching this on the television and they go to the cinema to see a new feature-length episode. So I wonder why they did that. I wonder why they decided we need to establish these characters.
But like I said, they don't lay it on too thick. It's just kind of like, let's make sure that in those first few minutes when we first see the characters, we establish, Fletcher's a good guy and he knows how to get himself out of trouble. He's a cheeky word for the screws. Mackay's the authority figure. You're just establishing all that stuff.
This feels like an early modern British sitcom movie to me, and that this very much feels like you would kind of watch the 3 series of the show and then cap it off with the film, and it follows on from the show, rather than a lot of those earlier Britcom movies were kind of set in their own fiction, their own separate continuity, or they didn't really work as a sequel to the show in the same way. This felt like the modern way of doing it. Like, we're going to do a film. Here's all your favourite characters.
It is slightly like that. It was made after the series was finished, but bear in mind the series itself was followed up by a sequel in which they were out of prison that just did one series called Going Straight. So, and it was after that as well. So in that sense, it doesn't quite make sense in the timeline, but you could very easily take this, drop it into the timeline of when they're in prison, and it makes perfect sense.
I've seen officially it's set a year before the final episode of the show.
I don't think they bothered with all of that stuff back then. They just said, "Here's the film, watch it."
That's what I mean,
it fits.
I think someone's inferred that because he says I'm due to be out in a year in the film itself.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting actually who's there, because we have Ives, Horrible Ives, who is basically only in series 1. He's in the first episode of series 2.
And he's replaced by Warren, isn't he, in the series?
Not like for like, but yeah, in terms of one of the regular characters, yeah. He's in the film because he was a sort of favourite character. I think the only reason he wasn't in the series was because the actor was busy doing other things rather than they didn't want him. But then we have Grouty, Peter Vaughan as Grouty, who doesn't turn up in the actual series until later on, although he is mentioned quite early mentioned. On. I think he's only in 2 episodes of the series, maybe 3, but he makes such a big impact that it's like, okay, well, yeah, it makes sense to have him in the film. Grouty is kind of integral to the plot, but they don't lean on him. And Ives, I mean, it's just a few lines here and there. It's not an integral part of the thing. You could easily have put another actor in and called him Atkinson or whatever.
Is this what we these days call fan service?
I mean, perhaps to an extent, but or maybe just like, well, these are the characters that populate the prison. And one of the good things about Porridge, the series, is that they don't particularly go, right, we have our 6 primary characters and every week we have to check in with them and see what they're up to. We have to make sure we have subplot involving so and so and so and so. That especially in the early days, that was not the worry. It was all around Fletcher, and then everyone else kind of comes and goes, and we have our regulars, and then sometimes David Jason comes in.
But the opening scene of the movie, we have 2 new convicts being brought in. So there's Rudge, played by Daniel Peacock, and Oakes, Barry Rutter's character, who later becomes instrumental in this escape. Also in that opening scene, this transport of these prisoners, we've got a new guard, Beale, played by Christopher Godwin. And I'm not really sure why we have him. Obviously, there is he becomes relevant to the plot, but I think that his impact on the plot could easily have been done by Barraclough. I don't know why we need him as an extra character.
I get the impression watching it, like, you're right, now that you mention it, I realise that it doesn't really pay off, but I think when I watched it last night, I was thinking, oh, this is the character they've added in, so the audience who's not familiar with the show can be given a little tour of the prison. Maybe. And
that makes sense, Saul, because and that's a common script writing thing, to have a new character come into the world so that the audience can see it by proxy from a new point of view. But Rudge is that character.
Yeah, Daniel Peacock's
have the new prisoner coming in, and he's definitely that character, as you can tell by the fact that he's completely instrumental to the first 20 minutes, which we're basically following him around and learning about him, and then he's completely forgotten about for the rest of the film.
It's a weird bait and switch. So the very opening scene, we see these 2 new convicts coming in. We've got Rudge and Oakes, and in that scene, Rudge is very much the focal point, and Oakes only has one line in the van. And so, and as you say, in the first 20 minutes, we are basically we're seeing the whole prison through Rudge's eyes, and Oakes is now forgotten. And it's only then in the second half that Rudge is, like you say, almost forgotten, and it turns out that the plot revolves around Oakes.
And then I think we have Beale, because we need the same thing, but from a side Rudge can't get to. We need to establish the prison officers club, the fact that you can't trust the prisoner, your bike bell will get nicked and all that sort of stuff. So I think they just need both sides of the wall, and so they've had to do that. Yeah, maybe you could write your way around that and not have him, but I think what you need, though, I think Beale, if you're going to bring in a new character like that, really hammer it home, but then are you going to lose a bit of Mackay? Are you going to lose a bit of Barraclough? Why not have that new character? Because he's kind of not one thing or the other. He definitely doesn't put up with any guff. Like he's not Barraclough. He's not letting him get away with anything. But then he's also not so stern that everyone's like, "Ooh, I hope he gets his just desserts at the end." He gets brought into the football match near the end as like, "Oh, they're actually playing against him," and then nothing really comes of that. Like they're all going to give him a good kicking, but then they just one of them knocks him over at one point, and that's it. And it kind of never comes to much.
Well, I mean, this is my, I don't know how film theory full on you want to get on this show, really, but like my main issue with this film is the structure. It's incredibly meandering and full of tangents. It doesn't really hold together as well as I remember episodes of the show coming together.
Well, we've seen many times in these films where it'll end up being basically 3 half-hour chunks.
Yeah.
And this is kind of in that. The first half hour is just establishing people, establishing characters. You've got Mackay losing his teeth in the curry and that kind of bit. It's just establishing the world. And you really need to do that in 10 to 15 minutes, not 35. Then the second chunk is the football match.
Yeah.
And the third chunk is the escape slash
the third chunk
get back
is
in.
the premise of the film and what the whole film should be
Exactly.
about. And it should have taken them 10 to 20 minutes to get to that third chunk. And then an hour should have been spent on, them out.
So I tell you what's interesting, Sol. When I have seen this film before, but it must be 20 or 30 years ago. And my memory of it, if you'd asked me last week what it's about they escape, they're trying to break back in, and the film is about their adventures on the outside trying to get back in. They're actually only out in the runtime about 7 or 8 minutes.
Yeah.
And I hadn't remembered any of the film leading up to that point.
Well, that's interesting because if you'd asked me before I rewatched it last night what the film was about, I would have said, "Oh, it's about some sort of football match between the prisoners and some other guys for like."
Yeah. That's the concept, isn't it? They accidentally break out of prison. They've got to get back in. It expands your world. It means you've got your primary characters outside of their normal environs, and you can kind of do much more with them. It's the equivalent of taking them on holiday to Spain.
And it's a great setup for a Porridge film. You know, they're not just that they get out of prison and you finally kind of have this, whole new world to play with, really. But then the premise that they have to stage a prison break-in to get back in. It's like, this is a great concept for a Porridge film.
And that the prison break-in is really perfunctory. It's 3 minutes at the end. It's more of a punchline than a plot line.
Yeah.
And it feels like a totally wasted opportunity. Even like they accidentally escape and the guy is like, well, you're going to have to come with me. I can't let you go back. And he goes, well, come on, I'm not going to talk. All right, then you can go back. That's it. It's one half a scene. But there's so much you could do with that, being stuck with a psychotic kind of killer on the loose or whatever he is.
Yeah, and that's just it. I think if this film were made nowadays, if Porridge were a contemporary sitcom and they were making the film now, I think this script would have been completely hammered into shape in this way. I think they would have said, right, we need to get straight into the action. They would have been out of the prison within the first half hour, and then, like you say, all of these bits would have been completely expanded. You'd get a load of action scenes. You'd probably have a villain in the form of that guy who's on the run trying to hunt them down outside of prison, as well as the prison guards. You'd end with him getting his comeuppance. You'd end with the kind of kingpin character in the prison getting some sort of comeuppance, because he, again, I'm going to guess he's a character in the series. I don't really remember, but I don't think we ever see him again after he weighs in on the football match, do we?
We see him right at the end where he goes, Fletcher, you've done well, I'll make sure you're taken care of, kind of thing. But that's actually I think that works quite well. That is kind of the character of Grouty. He's untouchable, and you do right by him, and he'll do right by you, but don't cross him. Whereas, it is a bit surprising that the guy who escapes, who's an armed bank robber, or whatever he is, escapes. Like, there's
no consequences for him. We're sort of jumping around here plot-wise. We've kind of gone through the film straight away, but can we talk about Genial Harry Grout as a character?
Yeah.
As you say, he does appear in a couple of episodes, but he is this kind of, even though the ones he's not, he's a presence, isn't he? He's the sort of the unofficial governor. I think he's great. I think Peter Vaughan does such a good job. He's never anything but friendly and smiling, but the menace is real. Ronnie Barker does a good job of showing genuine fear without trying to look afraid. I think it's really well portrayed.
Yeah. And it allows to show Fletcher's character. Like, he's afraid of Grouty in a different way to how he's afraid of Mackay.
Yeah.
Because Grouty will kill him. Literally, like, break his bones and kill him. Whereas Mackay is going to shout at him and maybe, like, make him clean out the toilets or whatever. It's like Mackay's real authority is quite limited. But Fletcher likes to play all the sides and not get involved, really. So when he's forced to. And there's a lovely scene which does establish the Grouty character where the young Rudge kind of mouths off at Grouty, not knowing who it is. And Fletcher saves him, but does so in a way that doesn't ruffle anyone's feathers. It's almost like, oh, we forgot what was happening.
He tells him a joke.
And it's a beautiful little scene of establishing Fletcher's character.
But there was, I did think there, why is Fletcher doing that? Like, why is he helping this kid out? What's in it for him? Maybe Rudge now owes him a favour.
Yeah, but that's the good thing about Fletcher. It's not quite as simple as, look, I do this for you, you do this for me. Although he kind of talks that talk a lot. We know he looked after Lenny when Lenny first came in. And he's just thinking, look, this is some young kid who's just angry, doesn't know what he's doing. getting angry at the wrong people, and he needs, I'm just going to look out for him.
In screenwriting terms, that sheer pet the cat moment, that's what makes you care about the protagonist of this film. It's like, right, we know this guy's in prison. He's probably a bad guy for some, on some basic levels. So why should we care about him? Oh, look, he's got a heart of gold. He's looking out for that.
Yeah, he is sort of moral good still, isn't he?
I'll take that. I accept that, yeah.
By the way, the guy playing Rudge, do you recognise him? It's called Daniel Peacock.
Daniel Peacock. Honestly, Daniel Peacock, when I was a kid, I used to really love the Comic Strip Presents films. And he always popped up, and I was like, why is this guy here? Why he's not in the young ones? I don't like him. And so I don't know, I've never really liked Daniel Peacock. But I don't think that's fair. There's a perfectly good job here. Yeah,
it's weird, isn't it? Like, he's one of those faces that does crop up in things in the 80s, in all that kind of, he's in a French and Saunders, or he's in a Young One, whatever it is. He's just like cropping up in all that. But then I don't really place him with any specific role. I know
that his dad was Trevor Peacock, who was in The Vicar of Dibley.
Yeah,
and if you see a picture now, a contemporary picture of Daniel Peacock, he looks just like his dad in The Vicar of Dibley.
Oh, they might be able to start doing a few more Christmas specials. Did you know he's got another peacock, Harry Peacock? It's his half brother. Yeah. So that will be Trevor Peacock's son. He plays Ray Purchase in Toast of London.
Oh, right. Okay.
If you could place
Ray
that,
bloody Purchase. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah. And Daniel Peacock was in Trail of the Pink Panther, which I've been watching recently. I've watched all the Pink Panther films. Oh, he makes a very brief appearance in that as a young Peter Sellers. Let's talk about the other cast members, shall we? We've got our regulars.
Well, I think what's interesting here is that we've established Mackay as this sort of ex-military sergeant major type character, and he's not there to make friends, unlike Barraclough, who doesn't try to build any relationship with the cons. But what's interesting about the film here is that we see, via the medium of the officers' club, that all the other officers hate him as well. It's not just the cons that don't like him. Even his colleagues can't bear to spend any time with him.
That is interesting, because we don't see that in the series. And it does make him a bit more of a figure of fun, I think, which is...
Yes.
I don't know if that quite works for Mackay, that he's a bit pathetic.
Yes, and when he loses his teeth, doesn't he? And they're trying to find his teeth, which Fletcher has. And so there's just one scene where we go over and we see and it's just like, oh, come on, you're better than this.
You're right, actually, because my memory of the show was that he was very competent and
he was a worthy adversary to Fletch.
And I remember, he's what I remember from Porridge more than Fletcher, to be perfectly honest. But I also remember getting hints of him also being not a total arse. I'm sure a few episodes end with him showing a little bit of humanity here and there as well.
Yeah. The idea is he knows how to play the game. Yeah. He's been there just as long as all these inmates have, and he respects Fletcher particularly to some extent. He doesn't like Fletcher getting away with his little tricks and he wants to catch him. But ultimately, Fletcher's a good inmate who doesn't cause any violence or trouble, keeps his nose clean. And will, when the situation is right, will give information. He won't come and snitch, but he will kind of make sure someone knows what's happening.
And so I was surprised, to be honest. I kind of, based on what I remembered of the show when I went back into this film, I don't know, I kind of remembered them having a dynamic where he could basically turn up on the outside of the prison walls and be like, hey, we got stolen when the guy broke out, but we've come back. And he'd sort of be like, look, I respect, good on you for coming back. I don't know, my read on the character was sort of so off base, because instead we just get this, they break into the officers' club, drink some of his booze, and then they do a little sitcom end tag where they he kind of says, well, look, I know you were out of the prison, and they were like, oh, were we? And then they eat an apple in sync, and it kind of freeze frames, and that felt a bit odd, but it also felt like, that's how an episode of the show would have ended. They're kind of paying
I like that ending.
Reverence to that,
But you could have so much more fun with just Mackay and Barraclough are driving around the countryside looking for escaped inmates, and having shenanigans as they go along. Yeah. Maybe they obviously come together at some point, but they're dressed up as farmers and they manage to put on accent and get away with it. It's all there's so much possibility for things to happen.
Also, what's the whole thing? There's like a running subplot. That's a generous term, but like there's a mention of Barraclough going through a divorce, or he's been through a divorce.
Well, that's throughout the show. Basically, he's in an unhappy marriage.
Right.
So, yeah, there's him and Fletcher having a conversation. Oh, you're looking a bit down in the mouth, Mr. Barraclough. Anything the matter? Mrs. Barraclough's left you, has she? And there's a beautifully timed, unhappily, no, Fletcher.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that, and then there's one more mention later on where he says something like, well, better that than be stuck with her for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it's better to have loved and lost than to be stuck with her forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that problem is he is married. He's not divorced. He's stuck with her forever. But yeah, look, I would like to see more Barraclough. I'd like to see more Mackay. Let's have them as a buddy cop duo going out trying to catch an escaped inmate whilst the inmates are trying to get back in and all that sort of thing. Maybe they have to end up working together to finagle them back in because it's in all their own interests to do it. There's lots of possibilities there. Yeah.
Let's talk about Godber, because I think this film does not play to his strengths. I don't think we get enough of him. We see him trying to put a metaphorical arm around Rudge, but I don't want it from Godber. I want him to be the innocent naif. I don't like it that there's a new one there, and I think that kind of takes something of the edge away from his character.
I see what you mean. I think by this point in the timeline of Porridge, he's been there a while. He has settled in, and I think we could certainly have had more from Godber, just in general. Mm-hmm. When they're escaped, there's lots of action for them to do together, but it only lasts like 6 or 7 minutes.
Yeah.
So we're missing it. And in the other stuff, it just feels like he's the placeholder to give someone Fletch to talk to, rather than a really kind of rounded character.
I agree. I think Richard Beckinsale is underused in this film. Actually, while we're talking about him, Alan, this was his last role, wasn't it? Didn't he die just after this was made?
Yes, he did. Yeah. I mean, his last role was, what's it called, Bloomers. He was literally filming when he died, and they put it out with 5 episodes instead of 6 because he never finished it. But yeah, this was his kind of last thing that was all sort of done and dusted before he died. Yeah. Right. So in the background we've got quite a few other little faces and things that I saw. Did you notice anyone jump out at you? There's quite a few.
Well, I noticed Gordon Kay as the bus driver who was in on the escape plan.
Yeah, this is a couple of years before Hello Hello, so he was relatively unknown.
Is that who that was?
Spelt his name wrong in the credits. He's obviously well known after this. But there's quite a few other characters who were people who you would recognise now, but at the time they were just playing footballers in the background. So
go on.
Carl Howman,
cheeky Jacko from Brushstrokes.
Yeah,
cheeky ladies man.
He makes a couple of lines. Duncan Preston as a weatherman.
Oh, I did see Duncan Preston. TV. Yes.
Paul Barber is one of the footballers he's knocking about. Okay. I don't think he even says anything, but it was definitely.
This would have been before Only Fools and Horses, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Grouty, at one scene, Grouty's tailor is like measuring up for a suit or something. That's Robert Lee, who is a Chinese actor who played a Japanese man in Mind Your Language, is what he's most well known for. Okay. But yeah, you will see him in sort of all sorts of things. Derek Deadman is as Minnie Cooper, who's like the guy who looks like he's spent a lot of time as a boxer. He's got sort of smashed up face.
Yes, I did recognise him. Where do I know him from, Alan?
He's one of those people who's kind of in all sorts of things, but his most regular role was Never the Twain.
Yeah, okay, yeah. He popped up in a few of those comic strip films as well.
Yeah, he's in that kind of that crowd. I think that's it. There's a few others sort of just like people you know, and obviously you got your regulars like Sam Kelly as Bunny Warren. He's in a couple of scenes, but it feels just like that feels a bit more like fan service. Yeah, okay, let's have Bunny Warren in there as a thing. No lukewarm.
Oh yeah, Christopher Biggins.
Yeah,
no, this is interesting because there is a whole sort of subplot. Well, that's a bit grand. There's a recurring joke about some of the inmates wearing makeup, as Beale refers to it, poovery in the prison.
There are a couple of problematic moments that haven't dated well on that front. Again, like is that a big part of the show? I don't remember any of that. But then I didn't remember
interestingly,
it
in the show, Sol, Christopher Biggins plays a character, lukewarm, who's he's camp, and the character is gay. And it's pretty well treated. There's a couple of off-color jokes, but he's part of the gang. The character is not excluded, and it's pretty good actually.
Yeah. What's the line in the film that there's something about? Is it like getting bent out of shape or something? And then
they're painting the changing rooms.
Who are these fellows? Whitaker, Sarr and Wally. I picked them because they have an autistic bent.
Well, we're bent.
I know.
Carry on.
Just the weird
slightly less enlightened.
Yeah, I mean, but no, I agree. Like it's clearly coming from a place of these guys are equal.
Well, it's like I think we said in the show, in our look at the series, for its time, it's quite progressive.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite land that well now, but certainly it's not the sort of thing that you would have to like.
I think that's the fairest way to judge something, isn't it? You know.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, we've already kind of looked at half the plot here. The main crux of it, once we've established everything, is that someone comes up with the idea of having a celebrity football team come to the prison to play a charity match against the inmates. And now this is actually a setup for an escape, but nobody realizes that at the time. And they manage to. It's a nice way they manage to work it up the chain. Grouty wants Fletcher to do it so that he doesn't get responsibility. Fletcher pushes it onto Beale to make it look like the guards have come up with the idea. And then Mackay steals the idea from Beale because he wants the glory of it. Yeah. So, again, it just shows how clever Fletcher is. He's managed to disengage himself from this that he knows is going to be a disaster or whatever happens. But even he doesn't know what's really going to happen at this point. He just knows not to get involved. And so, yes, we get the training montage. We have... We have the scene where Oakes is forced into the team.
Yeah.
Well, put it another way, I mean, I was basing it on the fact that he cannot tackle, pass, trap or dribble. He throws in well, mind.
He's playing.
No, he's not.
Yes, I am.
Is he? Oh, yes. Oh, look, I've got your name down here all the time, Oaksy, look. It's just I've spelled it Macmillan.
He knows how to keep his mouth shut. So, yes, we get the football match. So the celebrity team turn up. There's going to be a goodie. There's Michael Parkinson might turn up. But unfortunately, no, it's a bunch of...
I did like it. It's a sort of joke that all these celebrities are non-entities and nobody knows who they are. I thought that was a nice precursor of your celebrity Love Island type things, you know?
Yeah.
You know, whenever one of these new programs launches, everyone on social media is like, who's he? Never heard of you.
All I know about charity football is that I used to like watching a selection of clips. It was Boris Johnson doing a charity football match when I was younger, and I thought it was very funny because he made a tit out of himself, and you know it was back when Boris Johnson was still like a cuddly game show host you could laugh at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was back when it was funny.
So the plot contrivance here is that the celebrity football match will be used as cover to effect this escape. The bus driver for the celebrities is Gordon Kay. He's in on it. And then they contrive to get Oakes off the pitch. He feigns an injury. And then he swaps clothes with Gordon Kay, ties him up, and off he goes. And the whole plan is working like clockwork until Godber bangs his head. And him and Fletcher end up mixed up in it all.
Mm.
But here's what I was thinking as I was watching this happen. This is reminding me of Escape to Victory. Have you seen the film Escape to Victory?
Yeah.
Now,
yes.
I looked it up, and Escape to Victory was made 2 years after this. So do
really?
you think the makers of Escape to Victory were Porridge fans?
Yes, I do. Well, Michael Caine's in it, and he was in Water.
Oh, there you go.
Some time after. So that's good enough for me. Interestingly, though, the film was directed by Dick Clement.
Did he direct any of the TV series, or was that a one-off thing?
He didn't. I believe it was Sidney Lotterby who directed the series. There's a character in this film called Lotterby. He had directed before TV and bits and pieces. He directed The Likely Lads, which again was because the director that was lined up dropped out or died, maybe. I can't remember, but there was a last minute thing, and so he just stuck thrown to direct, even though he didn't know what he was doing. But obviously done a bit more since then. I think direction-wise, this is solid. There's nothing kind of particularly stand out about it, but certainly nothing wrong with it, visually speaking. So,
well, on the subject of the visuals, what about the sets and because obviously in the series, you know, there's a lot of exterior shots and prison landing shots are all shot on location, but we have some studio stuff as well. This seemed to be all location, didn't it?
Yes, they filmed in a real prison, Chelmsford, I think, but it had had a fire and was being renovated. So it was empty of prisoners, and so they could film in there, or part of it was anyway. But they were also renovating the place while they were filming and making a lot of noise in the background, so it caused problems for that. But yeah, it is a real prison. It looks quite cool, I think. Like even when they just go into the kitchen and stuff, it just looks very stark, and it's constantly overcast and miserable. There is something really grey and kind of prison-y about the whole thing. Yeah. And it's deliberate, it's reflective of the mood that is there. Even when you see them going in, it's Barraclough is just saying this is really a miserable place, and and there's nothing anywhere near. We're trapped here. Well, he doesn't say that, but one of the prisoners says you're as much prisoners here as we are.
I really like Barraclough. Are we supposed to like him? Are we supposed to feel sorry for him? Because he is pathetic, but I just like him. I just warm to him.
I think you're meant to like him.
You're definitely supposed to think he's pathetic. Yeah.
You can like a pathetic
but you want him to do all right, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. You want him to have his moment. Again, that's something that's sort of lacking here, that I think if this film were made now, they'd kind of know enough about hammering something into the conventions of a film. You would give him his moment to stand up for himself. He'd probably have a confrontation. Yeah. He'd probably be the guy who ends up having a confrontation with the escaped criminal and has to do violence against him or something, really stick up for himself, and then we'd be like, way, masculinity.
Yeah, they never do that though. They never really play into that with Barraclough. Like he has the occasional moment where he kind of accidentally has a bit of success. There's one episode where a prisoner holds them all hostage, and Fletcher manages to talk him down. But then Barraclough manages to get the credit because Fletcher doesn't want to be involved. Yeah. Or there's one episode where Mackay goes away and a new, even worse screw comes in. And so they rebel, and there's a riot until Barraclough comes in and goes, "Come on now, lads, everybody settle down." And they all go, "Oh, it's right enough, Mr. Barraclough, very good, very good." And they all clean up. Because they want Barraclough there because he's a soft touch. So they make sure that everyone in power thinks he's a great, guard who's doing a good job. And there's nice moments in that, that's lovely stuff. And yeah, that's perhaps something we needed here, a little moment like that. Yeah. Maybe he's the one who finds them on the outside or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about one of the main things we always have to deal with these sitcom films? There's no laugh track. Yeah. There is no live audience for them to actually play off of in a start, but also no laughter track. And, sometimes that really, really hits hard.
I actually didn't even register that watching it last night, which I think is because I haven't watched the TV show in 10 years. I probably, didn't think about it. No,
I disagree, Saul. It really clanged for me. There was a few I can't remember an example. There was a few times where I thought, oh, that's a great line. That deserves a laugh, and I missed the laugh.
I think the film feels quite cold in a way that, if there was a laugh track, I think it would feel a lot warmer.
That's a good way of putting it. I agree.
Very metaphorical terms here. But then it almost feels like it's going for quite a cold feel because it's so clearly blisteringly cold outside when they get out of the prison and so on. But yeah, I don't know, now that I think about it, I don't know if that's intentional because it doesn't really have that same feel of the show, and I guess that's probably not a good thing really, because making the prison seem that extra bit bleak doesn't really benefit what they're doing.
They did this with Only Fools and Horses. Obviously, these were feature film length episodes that were done on TV rather than out in the cinema. But they did a couple without, and it is horrible. It's just dead. So then they went, right, we'll need to put a laugh track on it, and it works so much better. But yeah, it's just not the culture to put it in the cinema. But if you did, would it work? Would it be weird?
I think it'd be very weird. Yeah.
I'm not sure it would. It'd be an interesting thing to experience. Yeah. But bear in mind that most people aren't, well, not most, a lot of people aren't watching cinematic films in cinemas anymore.
I know,
so it wouldn't feel all that unusual to watch
in 1979 they were. If you went to see this film on a Saturday evening with your lady friend and a bunch of other people fill in the space, and you're getting the laughs, does it have the same impact? The reason we need a laugh track for when you're watching it in TV is because you just sat there.
Because no one else to laugh with.
That's the reasoning there. But I always... When was the last time you went to see a comedy in the cinema and everyone was laughing along, punctuating all the jokes?
I never go when there's more than 4 people in the cinema anyway. So
I just can't imagine a cinema full of people watching Porridge and like cracking up at every gag in the same way that a studio audience would watching it being taped.
It's just not the same atmosphere, is it? Yeah. It was different in the 70s. So.
Yeah.
Gareth, what was it like in the 70s?
Oh, it was a dark time.
Yeah, if you're lucky if you get through the film without a power cut, eh?
Just the stench of rotting bodies.
Well, mind you, it would have been full of smoke, wouldn't it?
It would actually, yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Joking aside, yes, you would have come out of that cinema stinking of cigarettes.
But still, could have got your bus fare home and a fish supper for less than $1. So.
Yeah, it's true.
I've got one comment, which is like a very minor detail, but doesn't the use of music at the start of the film feel really jarring?
Yeah, there are a couple of tunes, and I actually made a note. I said, right, okay, this is odd, music, I'll write down all the songs. And there was 2 songs at the beginning, and then I didn't write anything else down after that.
But they're like playing on the radio, and you're kind of listening to the radio the whole way through. So the sound mix is really weird, because they've sort of made the song sound like it's playing over the radio, kind of. I think nowadays you'd have that, but it would dip in and out of that in the sound mix. You'd kind of, you'd go to an establishing shot and it would come back on, going from diegetic to non-diegetic and back and forth. Whereas here,
that is what it does, isn't it? That's basically what happens.
I think it sounds kind of like it's playing on the radio the whole way through, doesn't it?
Yeah, but they go into a different room and it's like quieter because it's coming through the speakers and one main room.
Maybe.
It was the one thing that jumped out at me as a slight kind of directorial flourish of doing something a little bit interesting.
Yeah, it feels like a big, we've got the money for a film, we can make this big and cinematic, let's put some big like contemporary popular songs on that we wouldn't normally get to play with. But it just, it felt very jarring to me. Firstly, when they're both, it's Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick and what's the other one that plays?
Nielsen, I Can't
Can't Live Without You. Yeah, like 2, dare I say, classic songs of the era, but I don't know what it is, but like those, maybe it's because I wasn't alive back then, but like those songs exist in a different part of my headspace to Porridge. Porridge feels like it's set in a different world that doesn't have popular pop culture as we know it, like doesn't exist within the world of Porridge. So it's weird to kind of have them. It'd be like watching an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation and they like go into Picard's quarters and he's just watching Friends on TV. It'd be weird.
But yeah, we've talked about this, with shows that show their age and some that don't. And because Porridge is kind of outside of the real world.
Well, it's an institution. It's an institution that isn't interacting with the world.
Yeah. They're not wearing any fashions because, they're just in prison fatigues. And it feels like prison life is probably kind of the same, albeit with, some differences. But, most of us don't really know what prison life is like anyway. So it's kind of an alien thing. Whereas some things it's about, like a housewife in the 1970s just feels really out of date now.
Yeah. And I guess also, like, again, if they were making this film nowadays and this was a contemporary thing, I don't think you would get, a song from this year opening the film. I think you would be just as likely to open the film with Without You or whatever the song's called by Harry Nilsson and Ian Drury. Yeah, I think it's kind of an odd thing almost to timestamp it in that way, but I don't really know. That same exact song, for example, features quite prominently in Alan Partridge Alpha Papa. It's
there is a song over the credits as well, an original song, I think.
Oh yeah,
looked like Ian Lafrene was one of the writers of it.
This was still the era, presumably, of you go and see the film and then you buy the tie-in single that comes out. Was it? Is it not that?
Nothing like... No, I don't think so. Not something like that. Maybe if you had Ronnie Barker singing a song or something like that. Yeah. It's not Bernard Bresslaw in The Army Game doing
that's what I was thinking
Mad Passionate Love.
I only asked.
Well, is there anything else we want to talk about with Porridge?
Well, I think, it was all right. I quite enjoyed the film. It wasn't as good as it had been in my memory, but that tends to happen a lot when we watch these old things. But honestly, if you want to watch some Porridge, go on iPlayer and watch the series. It's so much better than this.
I think the film holds up really well, actually. I think it does. We've picked it apart a little bit. I think I've been a bit negative. I enjoyed it, and I think it is well in keeping with the tone of the show. It's original material, which is more than you can say for a Rising Damp film.
Yeah.
And quite a few others.
Yeah, Rising Damp came out the following year, that film, as well. Like, when I watched Rising Damp...
Same production company.
Oh, really? When I watched that film, it felt like, oh, God, this is a real old-school way of doing things. So it's weird to see that... Like I say, this felt like, right, we've kind of figured out how to make these Britcom movies now. We're kind of getting the hang of it. So, no, I mean, it's a well-regarded film as well. It's, most of the other Britcom movies I'm aware of prior to this are not considered good films nowadays. They're considered these kind of crap cash-in things. Maybe some people have a bit of a fondness for the On the Buses movie or something because they watched it when they were younger, but it does. I feel like this is regarded as a film that did the show justice.
Well, it's worth noting that Dick Clement and Ian LaFrenney made films. They wrote and produced, directed a number of feature films
before this.
Kind of in amongst, both.
Okay.
But not like huge name things, but they were of a mind to go, let's make a film. Rather than, it's a quick cash in, if you want to use our scripts, fine, send us the check. They were hands-on. Dick Clement directed it,
Yeah.
And also, when they went to America, which was initially to do the Porridge remake, they stayed there. They live there still, I think. Certainly Ian LaFrenney does, because he married an American, I think. They were uncredited script doctors for many, many years in Hollywood. They were running in major Hollywood circles. They did script doctoring on all sorts of major projects. For example, The Rock.
Yeah, Bad Boys.
Because they'd worked with Sean Connery before,
wow.
So he was like, oh yeah, I like them.
Super Mario Brothers, that classic.
But because they're good gag men, they're good with dialogue, all that sort of stuff.
Bad Boys 2.
So I think that makes Clement and LaFrenney slightly different from some of the other sort of British sitcom writers who are a little bit. It's a different world. They did have a mentality of this film idea, and perhaps that's expressed here. Perhaps that's why they really made more of an effort.
Interesting, but no, I'm with you. I think it's good little film. Really, it's definitely got problems, like I say, mostly structural and pacing issues, but it's very enjoyable.
They're things that we can look at and go, that could be better. But it's not like, oh my God, they're making this film crap. It all works. The structure is a bit clunky, but it still flows from one thing to another.
I feel like I might have said this on here before on another episode, but I made a point a while ago of watching like every British sitcom movie that I could get my hands on and just really exploring that. And Porridge is by far and away the best one I've found from before the millennium, before the kind of modern wave of things. And Porridge is the best of the bunch there. In fact, even with the more modern ones mixed in, it's better than a lot of them. So
I think it is a good film. It's still got all those elements, ingredients that you like, and it's funny. It's well written.
Well, as I said before, I think it's the rare instance of a film that kind of does justice to the show it's based on. It kind of feels like that's Porridge.
So so that's Porridge, and we've covered that one pretty well. Probably my favourite sitcom ever. The show,
really,
it would definitely be in the conversation. Yeah, definitely.
Really, like not even including new stuff.
I've never seen any new stuff. I don't know what you're talking about. Was it made before 2008? That's my limit. No, definitely it'd definitely be in the conversation as one of my favourites. So we really enjoyed when we did the show. I enjoyed watching the film again. But thank you very much for joining us there, Sol.
Thanks for having me.
We'll have you again later. We're looking at something else later in our series that has a film spin-off. Ooh. Gareth, thank you as always. Do you want to give us our socials, Gareth?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. You come and join us on the social medias. For now, we're still on Twitter until Elon Musk destroys it.
Banned. We are a parody of a podcast.
We're on Twitter and Instagram at BritcomPod. Or you can find us on Facebook. We've got a page if you just search for British Sitcom History Podcast, and we'll come up there.